Namaste and good evening, respected course facilitator and dear scholar colleagues. Today I am going to have a virtual presentation about Newmark's semantic and communicative translation. I am Krishna Khanal from Kapilvastu and now from Nepal Open University, MPhil second semester. Newmark. Newmark is a very influential person in the field of translation. Newmark was influenced by NIDA. And Newmark is but far from NIDA's receptor-oriented view. Newmark says there is always a gap in the theory and practice of translation, and success of translation equivalent is illusory. We can actually never gain the translation equivalent. Newmark suggests semantic and communicative translation to minimize the gap in translation. His semantic and communicative translation resemble again to the NIDA's theories. Newmark's communicative translation resemble to NIDA's dynamic equivalence, and Newmark's semantic translation resemble with NIDA's formal equivalence. But he distances himself from full principle of equivalent effect of NIDA. Newmark says equivalence is not operant if the text is out of target language space and time. For example, Muna Madan's any version of translation can never give the original flavor that we gain in the Nepali language. Semantic translation is different from literal translation as it respects the context. It interprets and explains the important matters, the important phrases. For example, if there are metaphors, they are translated and explained by making some sort of footnotes. And literal translation sticks very closely to the source text, lexis and syntax, or most probably it is word for word translation. Newmark's semantic and communicative translation can be compared on the basis of the parameters. The parameters to compare Newmark's semantic and communicative translation are: the first one is transmitter focus. In semantic translation, the focus is on thought process of the transmitter as an individual. The translation is regarded as an individual himself or herself. But in communicative translation, the target text reader is focused. It is oriented towards a specific language and culture. The second parameter to compare them is the culture. Semantic translation remains within source language culture, and communicative translation transfers the foreign elements into target language culture. The third parameter is time and origin. Semantic translation is not fixed with any time or local space. Translation needs to be done with every generation. For example, if we do some text translate now, the next generation needs the next version of translation. The translation will not work for more than one generation. And communicative translation is rooted on its contemporary context. It focuses what is the actual contemporary society, contemporary context at the time of text created. The fourth parameter is the relation to the source text. In semantic translation, it is always inferior to the source text. There is loss of meaning. Some meaning is lost in semantic translation. But in communicative translation, it may be better than the source text. it can gain clarity even if loss of semantic content is there. The fifth criteria is use of form of source language. On the basis of form of source language, semantic translation is loyalty to the source text author. If any deviation is made by the source text author, no correction is made. The translation is not going to do any correction though there are mistakes by the author. But in communicative translation, it is loyalty to the target language norms it shows. If the translator sometimes makes some mistakes, if the author makes some mistakes, the translator is going to correct them. The sixth criteria is form of target language. The form of the target language also helps to distinguish semantic and communicative translation. In semantic translation, it is more complex, it is more awkward, it is more detailed, and tendency to over translation is there. And in communicative translation, it is smoother, it is clearer, it is simple, and there is tendency to under translate. The communicative translation is smoother, clearer, simpler, and tendency to under translate. The seventh criteria is appropriateness. So, semantic translation is used for serious literature, autobiography, political statements. And communicative translation is basically used for vast majority of the text. It can be used for popular fictions, technical text, informative text, and for publicity. And the last criteria to compare semantic and communicative translation is criteria for evaluation. Criteria evaluation. Semantic translation is evaluated on the basis of accuracy of reproduction of the source text, and communicative translation is evaluated on the basis of accuracy of communication of source text message into the target text. Very importantly, Newmark focuses on literal translation in both semantic and communicative translation. Newmark himself says, in communicative translation, as in semantic translation, provided that equivalent effect is secured, the literal word-for-word translation is not only the best, it is only the valid method of translation. This means, if possible, we have to try for literal word-for-word translation. Best result. Thank you, and this much for today. Namaste.